The rain in Port Halcyon isn't like other rain. It doesn't just fall, it attacks. It comes in sideways, smelling of salt and diesel fuel, tasting like rust. It's been hammering the coast for 3 days straight, and the Blue Gull Diner, my 8-hour prison, feels less like a refuge and more like a fishbowl of lukewarm coffee and fluorescent light. It's 2 in the morning, or maybe 3. The clock on the wall has been stuck at 1:17 for a week. My apron pocket is heavy, not with tips tonight. The tips are garbage, but with the folded pink slip my landlord, Mr. Kowski, taped to my apartment door. Final notice. $350 I don't have, due by the 1st. On top of that, Mom's hospital bills from last month are sitting on my kitchen counter, a stack of white envelopes that feel like bricks. I'm 24 years old, and I'm drowning. The diner is almost empty, which is normal for a Tuesday. 2 truckers in booth 4, asleep on their arms, a handful of bearded, exhausted sailors in booth 2, nursing beers and speaking low, rough Greek, and him. He'd been here for an hour. He was in the back booth, the one by the warped jukebox, facing the windows, facing the storm. He wore a plain black button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled to the elbows. He wasn't big, not like the dock workers, but he held the space around him differently. He drank his coffee black, no sugar. I'd refilled it 3 times, and he hadn't looked at me once. Not directly. He just watched the rain blur the lights of the container cranes across the harbor. His only remarkable feature, besides the fact that he seemed perfectly calm while the wind tried to tear the building apart, was his watch. It wasn't flashy, not gold or diamond covered. It was dark metal, heavy, and the face was covered in a spider web of fine scratches, the kind you get from sand, or maybe salt, scraping against it for years. The bell over the door jangled, a harsh, rusty sound. I flinched, nearly dropping the heavy glass pot of decaf. 2 men stepped in, shaking the storm from their shoulders. They weren't sailors. Their jackets were thin, cheap leather, and their shoes were pointed. They smelled like damp cigarettes and something sweet, like cheap cologne trying to cover up the mildew. They didn't take a booth. They slid onto the stools at the counter, right in front of me. Marin Vale, the first one said. He had lank, greasy hair and a gap between his front teeth. Using my full name, my stomach tightened into a knot of ice. "Can I get you something?" I asked, forcing the professional, plastic smile. I reached for a menu, but he put a damp hand flat on the stack. "We're good," he said. "We're here about your brother, Theo." The ice knot in my stomach cracked and spread. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do," the second one chimed in. He was quieter, watching the truckers in the booth. "Little Theo works the docks, got sticky fingers. That one, he mishandled a crate down at Pier 9 last week. Belonged to our employer." He wouldn't," I whispered, but even I could hear the lie. Theo was always in trouble, always taking shortcuts. "It's a simple matter," Greasy Hair said, leaning in. I could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Our boss is understanding. He just needs a fee to cover the inconvenience. Let's say $500, and we forget the whole thing." I laughed. It came out as a sharp, ugly bark. $500. Look around, pal. I make $6.50 an hour, plus whatever loose change you guys leave on the counter. I don't have 500 cents. "That's a shame," he said, his smile vanishing. "A real shame, 'cause our boss hates being inconvenienced." From the back booth, there was a sound, the soft click of ceramic on formica. I glanced over. The man in the black shirt hadn't moved. He was still looking out the window, but he had slowly, deliberately, tilted his coffee cup, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. His reflection stared back from the rain-slicked glass. His eyes were no longer watching the storm. They were fixed on the men at my counter, and they were hard, not angry, just hard and flat and heavy as an iron anchor. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. My hand trembled as I grabbed the check pad. "I can't help you. I have nothing to do with Theo's business. You need to leave." I ripped off a blank check and slapped it on the counter. "Or buy a coffee." Greasy Hair looked at the check, then at me. He smiled again, slow and nasty. I've got a better idea. Maybe you can work off the debt, in pieces. He moved faster than I thought he could. He lunged across the counter, his fingers wrapping around my wrist like a steel trap. The check pad scattered. I cried out, yanking back, but his grip was brutal. "Let's go, sweetheart," he snarled, pulling me forward, dragging me off my stool. "We can talk about a payment plan in the parking lot." He was hauling me, my hips slamming hard into the corner of the stainless steel counter. I looked wildly at the other booths. The truckers were suddenly very interested in the bottoms of their mugs. The Greek sailors were staring, but not moving. From the kitchen, Sal, our cook, poked his head out, his face pale, then vanished back behind the grill. I wouldn't. The voice cut through the diner. It wasn't loud. It was deep, like gravel rolling in the tide, but it carried over the hiss of the rain and the buzz of the failing neon sign. The man in the black shirt was standing. He hadn't seemed to get up. He just wasn't in the booth anymore. He was standing 3 feet away, as if he'd materialized from the shadows. He moved with a silence that was terrifying, like a shark cutting through dark water. His hands were empty, hanging loose at his sides. He looked at the meaty hand clamped around my wrist. Then he looked at the man holding it. "Put their bill on my tab," he said, his voice calm. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, at me. Then his eyes settled on the 2 thugs. "As for you two, get lost." Greasy Hair laughed, but it was shaky. He still had hold of me. "Or what? Tough guy, who the hell are you?" From the kitchen pass-through, Sal the cook's voice came out in a strangled whisper. He sounded like he was being choked. "Dio, that's Silas Armand." The name meant nothing to me, just a name, Silas Armand. But the effect on the 2 men was immediate. It was like I'd thrown boiling water on them. The man holding my wrist didn't just let go. His hand recoiled, like he'd just touched a live wire. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with a sudden, sickening fear. "Mr. Armand?" The other thug stammered, his hands shooting up, palms out. "We didn't know. We didn't recognize you. Our mistake. We were just leaving. No trouble." Silas Armand didn't even look at them. He was looking at me, at the red marks already forming on my skin. "You made a mess," he said, his voice flat. They were gone in a second. They practically fell over each other, scrambling for the door. The bell jangled violently, and they were swallowed by the storm, leaving only the smell of their fear and their damp, cheap cigarettes. The diner was silent. The rain hammered the roof. I leaned against the counter, breathing hard, rubbing my wrist. "You all right, Marin?" Silas Armand asked. He knew my name. Of course he did. The thug had shouted it for the whole diner to hear. "Yeah, fine." My voice was a rasp. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said. He walked past me, back to his booth. He picked up his check, walked to the register, and pulled a thick roll of bills from his pocket. He peeled off 5 $20 bills, $100. He laid them on the counter. "For the coffee," he said. "That's too much," I stammered. "The bill is $3. "It's not enough," he replied, not looking at me. He pulled something else from his pocket, a business card. It was thick, heavy cardstock, stark white. I could see from where I stood that it was blank. No name, no logo. He walked back and slid it across the counter. It stopped right in front of my trembling hand. I looked closer. It wasn't blank. There was just a string of 10 numbers, a phone number. "They'll be back," he said. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, like telling me the sun would rise. "They know who your brother is, and now they know who you are." He turned and walked to the door. The bell jingled softly. He stepped out into the rain and disappeared. My shift ended at 4 a.m. Sal, who hadn't spoken a word since whispering that name, let me go 10 minutes early. My hands never stopped shaking. The $100 was in my apron pocket, heavy as a stone, folded around the 10-digit business card. It felt even heavier than the pink eviction notice. At 4:05, I grabbed my thin jacket, the one with the zipper that had been broken for 6 months. I said goodnight to Sal, who just grunted and kept scrubbing the grill. I pushed open the diner's glass door. The wind hit me like a fist, driving the cold rain into my skin. The smell of the diesel from the container ships was thick on the air, and I stopped dead. He was there, waiting. He was leaning against the side of a large, dark sedan parked in the shadows, just past the diner's weak yellow light. He was standing under the flickering blue and red neon of the Blue Gull sign, the one that had been missing the G for as long as I'd worked there. The rain was coming down in sheets, but he wasn't sheltered. He was just standing in it, his black shirt plastered to his chest. He saw me, and he didn't smile. He just pushed himself off the car and stood in the downpour, watching me. As the busted sign above him painted his face in flashes of blue and red, I stood there, frozen, my cheap jacket already soaked through, the cold rain stinging my face. The man, Silas Armand, just watched me from the curb. The flashing neon light of the broken diner sign made the shadows dance around him. "You're going to catch your death," he said. His voice was just as I remembered it, from inside low, calm, and carrying easily over the storm. I pulled my jacket tighter. "What do you want?" "Your address. I'm taking you home." "No, thank you." I started to walk away, my feet moving toward the bus stop 2 blocks down, even though I knew the last bus ran at 2. "You did more than enough in there. I can take it from here." I took 3 steps before he spoke again. "They weren't just in the diner to shake you down, Marin. They followed you from the docks." I stopped. The wind whipped my hair across my face, and I had to push it out of my eyes to look at him. "What the docks?" "I haven't been to the docks in a week." He gestured with his chin, not his hand, up toward a small, dark dome on a streetlight pole about 50 feet away. "You see that new camera? Went up 3 days ago. It's not city property." He looked back at me, his eyes pinning me in place. "That's Harbor Watch." Harbor Watch, I knew the name. They were supposedly a new citizen safety patrol, funded by port businesses. Their blue and white vans were everywhere lately, observing and reporting. "A ghost patrol," Silas said, his voice laced with something cold. "Set up by the Skarnov Circle, the men you just met. It's a private army, and they've been running surveillance on the entire Seabright district. They're looking for something. They must have seen you, seen your uniform, connected you to your brother." My blood went colder than the rain. Theo, my little brother, Theo. He worked the night shift as a stevedore, loading and unloading the massive container ships, always looking for an easy score. A sick feeling rose in my throat as I remembered, clear as day, how he disappeared last week, just vanished. He didn't come home from his shift. He didn't answer his phone for 12 solid hours. Then he'd reappeared at our apartment door, his eyes swollen shut, a deep purple and black bruise coloring his jaw. He'd brushed past me, smelling of bilge water and fear, and locked himself in his room. He hadn't said a word about it since. Not one word. "What do they want with Theo?" I whispered, the words almost stolen by the wind. "He took something," Silas said simply. "Something that wasn't his, and now they think you know where it is." He opened the passenger door of the sedan. The interior light flashed on, revealing clean, dark leather. "Get in the car, Marin, I'm taking you home." Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the lingering terror from the diner, or the sudden, sharp fear for Theo. But mostly, it was stubbornness. I was tired of being pushed by landlords, by thugs, by this quiet, imposing man who seemed to know everything about my life. "No," I said, my voice firmer. "I'm not getting in a car with you. I don't know who you are. I'll walk." He didn't argue. He didn't try to persuade me. He just closed the passenger door with a soft, expensive thud. He walked around the front of the car, got into the driver's side, and started the engine. The headlights cut 2 perfect white cones through the driving rain. I turned and started walking, my sneakers squelching in the waterlogged pavement. I didn't look back. I just walked, heading inland, away from the water and toward the rows of crumbling brick tenements where I lived. The streets were empty. Port Halcyon goes to sleep after the bars close, and all that's left is the sound of the foghorns and the clang of metal from the shipyards. The wind howled down the narrow alleys, a physical force that tried to push me back toward the sea. It was cold, a deep-in-the-bones cold that my thin jacket couldn't stop. I made it a block. Then I heard it, not my own footsteps, but the quiet, steady rumble of an engine. I glanced over my shoulder. The dark sedan was there. It was keeping pace with me, but on the next street over, separated by a row of dark warehouses. It wasn't tailgating me. It was paralleling. He was keeping a precise, respectful distance, just a shadow moving in my peripheral vision. I put my head down and walked faster. I hated this. I hated him for making me feel like I needed a protector, and I hated myself for the small, traitorous part of me that was relieved he was there. I turned onto Bright Street, the alley-sized road that led to my building. It was darker here, the streetlights either broken or non-existent. The harbor wind was a scream in this narrow canyon of brick. That's when a new set of lights flooded the alley. They came from behind, appearing out of nowhere, blinding me. A white van, a beat-up cargo model, engine roaring, it had no license plates. My heart leaped into my throat. I broke into a run, slipping on the wet cobblestones. The van sped up, its engine whining. It was going to cut me off before I reached the end of the block. I was trapped. Then, from the cross street ahead came Silas's sedan. He didn't speed, he just appeared, pulling directly into the van's path, blocking the entire alley. It wasn't a crash, it was a perfect, calculated blockade. The van slammed on its brakes, skidding, its tires shrieking on the wet pavement, stopping with its bumper maybe 6 inches from Silas's driver's side door. It all happened in 2 seconds. Silas was out of his car before the van even stopped rocking. He didn't go to the driver's window, he just opened his own car door, stepped out and used the open door as a shield. He reached back inside the car for a moment. I scrambled behind a rusted-out public telephone booth, my back pressed against the cold metal, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The van's doors flew open. 2 men jumped out, not the same 2 from the diner. These ones were bigger, dressed in the dark blue uniforms of the fake Harbor Watch. Silas said something. I couldn't hear it over the storm and the pounding in my ears. He didn't shout. One of the men from the van shouted back, "Move the car, old man. This is official business." Silas didn't move. He just shifted his stance. And I saw the glint of dark metal in his hand. It wasn't a pistol. Not a small one. It was something larger. Matte black. He wasn't pointing it. He was just holding it, letting them see it. I heard a single, sharp click. A sound that was clearer than the rain. A sound that meant ready. It was a message, not an attack. No blood, no shots, just a promise. The 2 men froze. They looked at the weapon. They looked at each other. They looked at Silas, who stood there in the rain like a statue. Without a word, they got back in the van. The engine growled as it was thrown into reverse. The van shot backwards, fishtailing down the alley and disappeared around the corner. Silence returned, filled only by the wind. I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. I slid down the wall of the phone booth until I was crouched on the wet ground, my arms wrapped around my knees. I was angry. I was terrified. And I was furious at myself for being so weak, for freezing like a rabbit. Footsteps, slow, measured. I looked up. Silas was standing over me, the dark weapon gone. He was just a man in a wet shirt again. He looked down at me, his face unreadable in the dark. "I told you I could walk," I choked out, the words tasting like shame. He crouched, getting down on my level. His knees had to be getting soaked, but he didn't seem to care. He just looked me straight in the eyes. "No one needs to be strong when they're attacked from behind," he said, his voice quiet. He held out his hand. It wasn't to help me up. On his palm was a small, folded piece of paper, already getting damp, different from the business card. "The number I gave you at the diner, that's for emergencies," he said. "This one," he pressed the paper into my clenched fist. "This is the internal line for the Orchid Syndicate. My personal line. You call it when you need to, and you don't have to explain why. Someone will answer, day or night. I stared at the damp paper. Orchid Syndicate. Sal the cook had said that. An organization, not just a man. I didn't take his hand to get up. I used the phone booth to pull myself to my feet, my legs unsteady. I want to go home. Your building is at the end of this block, he said. Seabright Tenement, apartment 4B. It wasn't a question. I didn't bother asking how he knew. I just nodded and started walking. This time, I didn't tell him not to follow. He walked behind me. The sound of his solid, heavy footsteps a strange counterpoint to my own light, trembling ones. We reached the entrance to my building. The Seabright Tenement is a 5-story brick monstrosity that always smells like boiled cabbage and damp plaster. The front door lock had been broken for a year. I'm fine now, I said, turning to him at the foot of the rotting staircase. Thank you for all of it. He just nodded, his eyes scanning the dark, peeling wallpaper of the lobby. I'll wait. You don't need to. I'll wait, he repeated. Not a suggestion. I turned and climbed the 4 flights of stairs. Each step creaked. The single light bulb on the second-floor landing was dead. By the time I reached the 4th floor, my lungs were burning. I walked down the hall to my door, 4B. I put my key in the lock. It didn't turn. It just pushed. The door swung open with a soft groan. My stomach dropped to the floor. I always lock my door. I lock it 3 times. I pushed it open. The smell of my own apartment hit me stale coffee, old books, and something new, something metallic and wrong. Silas was at the top of the stairs, standing at the end of the hall, before I even took a step inside. I don't know how he moved that fast, that silently. He was just there. He put a hand on my shoulder, not to comfort, but to stop me. Wait. He stepped in front of me, pushing the door open wider. My one-room apartment was destroyed. It wasn't just messy, it was a violation. My mattress was slashed, white stuffing spilling out like guts. The few books I owned were ripped from their shelves, their pages torn. My bag of waitress uniforms was emptied, aprons thrown across the room. My kitchen cupboards were open, flour and sugar crunching underfoot. They'd even smashed the cheap ceramic piggy bank where I kept my tip money. Maybe $40. Now just scattered pennies and dimes on the linoleum. But it was the message that made me stop breathing. Scrawled on the wall above my ripped mattress, written in thick white chalk, were 5 words. Pay the debt with the citrine ledger. Citrine ledger, I whispered, my voice sounding alien in the wrecked room. What is a citrine ledger? Silas didn't answer. He wasn't looking at the message. His head was tilted, his eyes scanning the room. Not like a person, but like a predator. He walked past the wreckage, his feet moving carefully, avoiding the debris. He stopped at my tiny bedside table. He looked at the lamp, a cheap, plastic thing I'd bought at a thrift store for $5. His hand moved, fast as a snake. He grabbed the lampshade, ripped it off, and snapped the base of the light bulb socket. A small, black and silver disc, no bigger than a quarter, fell into his palm, trailing a thin wire. A listening device. It had been in my room. How long? Days, weeks? They think you have it, he said, his voice dangerously low. He crushed the device in his fist. The logbook for all the amber smuggling that comes through this port. A list of every transaction, every bribe, every debt. The citrine ledger. But I couldn't form a sentence and my world was tilting. I'm a waitress. I serve coffee. I don't know anything about amber. He turned to face me. He was standing between me and the window, a dark silhouette against the graying, pre-dawn light. Exactly, he said. His voice was cold, sharp, and cut right through my panic. You're a waitress, but for the last hour, you served coffee to the one man in this city who is hunting for that ledger. He paused, letting the weight of it land on me. Me, as if summoned by his words. A pair of bright white headlights flashed across the alley. Sweeping through my dark apartment, the beam caught the chalk message on the wall, making it glow. A car door slammed shut on the street, 4 stories below, then another. They were here, the Skarnov Circle, or the fake Harbor Watch, or whatever they called themselves. They knew where I lived. They had bugged my room, and now they were back. I looked at Silas, my heart a trapped bird. He didn't even look out the window. His eyes were on the flimsy apartment door. "Tonight," he said, his voice flat and final. "I'll watch the door." My apartment door was thin plywood. It wouldn't stop a strong kick, let alone a determined crew. Silas didn't try to barricade it. He just stood by it, his hand on the deadbolt, listening. The sounds from the alley were muffled, shouting, a car engine idling too high. "They're arguing," he said, his voice a low murmur, about whether to rush the building or wait. He hadn't moved from the door, but his other hand was at his ear, pressing a small, invisible earpiece. "Jax, South Alley, thermal, roomy, roof access, east stairwell, no contact, just eyes. I want to know how many. And if the Harbor Watch van is their only asset." He was giving orders to the people on his internal line, the Orchid Syndicate. My mind was spinning, trying to catch up. Citrine Ledger, the name echoed in the trashed room, bouncing off the chalk-scrawled threat. And then, a memory, sharp as a shard of glass, cut through the panic. It was about 3 weeks ago. Another storm, just like this one, had slammed into Port Halcyon. The Blue Gull was packed with sailors waiting for the all-clear. A rough-looking group from a Norwegian freighter, their faces red from wind and cheap whiskey. I was refilling their coffees when I heard it. "Damned fool lost the whole package off Beacon 7, one of them slurred, his voice thick. Told him, "The citrine run is cursed, nothing but bad water." "Quiet, you," his friend had hissed, glancing at me. I hadn't thought anything of it. Citrine. Beacon 7, it just sounded like drunk dock talk. Names for boats or bars or women. Just noise. Now, it felt like a clue to the thing that had just destroyed my life. Silas was off the comms, and he was just watching the door again, his body perfectly still. He was a statue of coiled patience. "Why me?" I whispered, leaning against the one bit of wall that wasn't covered in my own belongings. Why would Theo? How could he? Another memory hit me, this one colder. Just last week, the night before he vanished for those 12 hours, he'd come home from his shift, his eyes bright with a desperate, manic energy. He was holding a box. It was old, wooden, inlaid with mother of pearl, a music box. "Look, Mari," he'd said, his voice too loud. "Antique, found it in a crate of scrap metal. Some rich guy's trash. We can sell this. We can pay off Mom's bill. All of it." I had been so tired. The eviction notice was already on the door. I saw his easy score for what it was, another problem, another fire to put out. "Take it back, Theo." I'd snapped. "Right now. You can't just find things like this. You're going to get fired, or worse." The light in his eyes died. "But, Marin, this could fix." "No, I'm tired of your fixes. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. Take it back before someone comes looking for it." He didn't argue, and he just deflated. He nodded, his face pale and grim. He turned and left the apartment. When he came back hours later, the music box was gone. I'd assumed he'd returned it. I'd been so relieved, I hadn't even questioned it. He hadn't returned it. He had hidden it. And now, pay the debt with the citrine ledger. My breath hitched. The music box. The ledger was the music box, or it was in it. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Not one person, at least 3, maybe 4. They were heavy-footed, clumsy, trying to be quiet and failing. Silas didn't tense. He just held up one finger, motioning for me to be silent. He backed away from the door, pulling me with him, positioning us in the small, dark alcove that led to the bathroom, out of the immediate line of sight. "Thud, thud, thud!" A heavy fist pounded on the plywood. "Harbor Watch Task Force," a man yelled, his voice artificially deep. "Open the door. We have a warrant to search the premises." My hand flew to my mouth. Silas just watched the door. "Go away!" I tried to yell, but it came out as a squeak. Ma'am, we have a warrant signed by Judge Miller, effective immediately. Open the door, or we will be forced to breach it. Silas leaned in, his mouth close to my ear. His breath was warm, smelling faintly of the black coffee he'd had hours ago. Stay behind me. Do not speak. He raised his voice, not shouting, but projecting. Every word was clear, cold and sharp. This is a private residence. Please slide the warrant under the door so I can review its legality. A beat of silence from the hallway, then a gruff laugh. We're not playing games, pal. You have 5 seconds. I'm not your pal, Silas replied, his voice dropping an octave. And you are not the Harbor Watch. You are associates of the Skarnov Circle, operating a fraudulent civil patrol, the real Harbor Watch. The one with the city charter doesn't conduct raids at 4 a.m. That's 1. More silence. 2, Silas continued. Judge Miller is on a fishing trip in the Keys. He hasn't signed a warrant in 10 days. And 3, he took a step closer to the door. Your warrant fails to specify the articles to be seized, a direct violation of the 4th Amendment. It is invalid. The man outside was furious. Who the hell are you? We're coming in. My name is Silas Armand, he said, and the name seemed to suck the air out of the room. And I am formally advising you that this building and every tenant in it is under the protection of the Port Authority Commission. If your hand touches that doorknob again, I will interpret it as a direct act of aggression against the Commission's assets, and I will respond by freezing every shipping container your employers have waiting in dry dock, as of now. It was the quietest hallway I had ever heard. I could hear the rain tapping on the window. I could hear the man on the other side of the door breathing. A long, tense minute passed, then another. Finally, the muffled sound of a muttered curse. The heavy, clumsy footsteps retreated down the stairs, much faster than they had come up. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding and slid down the wall, my legs giving out. Silas waited, listening, until he heard the van's engine roar to life in the alley and peel away. Only then did he relax his stance. He turned to me. They'll be back, but not tonight. They have to make calls. They have to verify. I was exhausted. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a black, empty pit in my stomach. I just nodded, pulling my knees to my chest, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. I must have dozed off, my head against the cold plaster, because the next thing I knew, the sky outside was a lighter shade of gray. The storm had eased to a drizzle. Silas was sitting on the one kitchen chair that hadn't been overturned. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the ruined room with a kind of detached focus. There was a plastic container on the floor next to me. I blinked. It was a microwavable tub of soup. It was still hot, steaming, actually, chicken and rice. Taped to the lid was a folded napkin. On it, in neat, cursive handwriting, was a note. Eat something. You'll feel better. Rumi. I looked at Silas, confused. Rumi? My associate, he said, nodding toward the door. She was on the roof. She made a provisions run. She's practical. I opened the container. The smell was incredible. I hadn't eaten since my shift started. Maybe 12 hours ago. I ate, my hand shaking. Using the plastic spoon Rumi had tucked into the tape, it was the best soup I'd ever had. It was hot and real, and it made the cold dread in my stomach retreat. Just for a minute. Who are you? I asked, my voice thick from the soup. What kind of man are you? He considered the question. He wasn't a man who spoke without thinking. The law in Port Halcyon is flexible. It's bought and sold at the docks like any other cargo. The police, the city council, the Harbor Watch. He gestured to the door. They're just brand names for the highest bidder. He turned his gaze on me. His eyes were dark, and for the first time, I saw something other than iron control in them. I saw a deep, profound weariness. I'm the kind of man who keeps his own laws when the official ones are for sale, he said. The Skarnovs want chaos. They want to tear the port apart for scrap. I want order. The Orchid Syndicate is order. And they just brought their chaos to my doorstep. To my doorstep, I corrected him. setting the empty soup container down. The courage from the hot meal was fading. No. He stood up and walked over to the potted plant by the window, a half-dead fern I always forgot to water. He reached into the dry soil and pulled out a small, black square with a wire antenna, covered in dirt. My blood ran cold, again. Another one. "This one is older," he said, crushing it in his hand. "The one in the lamp was new. This one has been here for weeks. They were already watching you. Marin, long before I walked into that diner, long before your brother took that music box." A new, colder fear washed over me. This wasn't about Theo's mistake. We were already in the net. Theo's theft had just pulled the string tight. As if on cue, my phone, which had been tossed into a pile of my aprons, buzzed. I scrambled for it, my heart pounding. The screen was cracked, but it lit up. A new text message from Theo. My fingers were trembling so badly I could barely unlock the phone. The message was short, riddled with typos. "Don't trust anyone. Not cops, not Harbor Watch, not even the man who helped you. They are all liars. I'm safe for now. Had to hide it. Ledger is where you still sing." My vision tunneled. Where you still sing. It was nonsense. I didn't sing. Not anymore. Not since Mom got sick. I used to. "The neon buoy," I whispered. Silas looked at me, his focus sharpening. "What?" "The neon buoy, it's a dive bar, a karaoke bar over on Fleet Street. I used to compete there, on weekends, to make extra money for the bills. Where you still sing. That's what he means." I looked up at Silas, the pieces clicking into place with a terrible, heavy sound. The sailors at the diner, the music box, the karaoke bar. Silas was already nodding. He understood it as fast as I did. "Theo didn't return the music box," I said, the words tasting like ash. "He hid it." "Not in a place, in a thing," Silas said, his eyes distant, calculating. "Something at that bar, something connected to the stage, a speaker, a microphone." He looked at me, his gaze locking with mine. "Or," he said, "a jukebox. We didn't go that night. Silas made us wait." "They're expecting us to be stupid," he'd said, back in the ruins of my apartment. "They're watching the bar. We go in now. We're cornered. We wait. We let them get bored. We let them think Theo's text was a bluff." So I spent 24 hours in a place I'd never seen. Safe house that looked like a high-end dentist's office. All gray couches and brushed steel. Roomy. The woman who'd brought me soup, stayed with me. She was quiet, with sharp eyes and hands that never stopped moving, either cleaning a weapon, typing on a laptop, or practicing knots with a piece of paracord, Jack's. The other member of Silas's team was built like a vending machine and said even less. The next night, the storm had finally broken, leaving Port Halcyon dripping and shrouded in a thick, cold fog. We didn't take Silas's sedan. We took a rusted-out plumber's van that smelled like iron and damp earth. The neon buoy was exactly as I'd left it 6 months ago. The sign was a buzzing, pink and blue mess, the N flickering like a dying heartbeat. It was a Tuesday, just after midnight, and the place was a tomb. One old man asleep at the bar, and the bartender, a guy named Salty, wiping down the counter. Silas, Jax, Rumi, and I entered. We didn't look like a team. We looked like 4 strangers who had wandered in out of the mist. "Go," Silas murmured. He and Jax took the booth in the far back, the one with a clear view of the front door and the emergency exit. Rumi slid onto a stool at the bar, ordering a club soda. I was alone, in the middle of the sticky floor. My heart was a hummingbird in my ribs. This place used to be my release. I'd come here after a double shift, my feet screaming, and I'd sing until my throat was raw, and for 3 minutes. I wasn't a waitress drowning in debt. I was just a voice. Now, the small particle board stage looked like a gallows. And the jukebox. It was the centerpiece of the bar, a big, beautiful Wurlitzer, with a pearlescent, yellowed ivory casing and bubbling neon tubes. It was magnificent and tacky, and I knew its every flaw. I walked over to it, my hands shaking. I fumbled in my pocket for the quarters Silas had given me. My fingers were so numb I dropped one. It rolled across the floor with a loud, accusing clatter. Salty. The bartender glanced up, annoyed. I picked it up and fed the machine. The lights brightened, and the old mechanism groaned to life. I scanned the titles. Frank Sinatra, Patsy Cline, a lot of 80s rock, and my song. The one I always sang, the one Theo always requested because he said it sounded like the ocean. River in reverse. My finger pushed the buttons. B17. The machine whirred. A mechanical arm moved, searching. It grabbed the vinyl record, but instead of swinging it to the turntable, there was a clunk, a grinding sound. The machine went quiet, the selection light blinking angrily. Salty, I called out, my voice sounding fake and high. The jukebox ate my quarter, it stuck. Salty sighed, a long, weary sound, and grabbed a ring of keys from under the register. Things been on the fritz all week. He came over, unlocked the back panel, and pulled it open. Before he could even look inside, Jax was there, moving faster than a man his size should be able to. Here, friend, let me help. I used to fix these. Salty just grunted and stepped aside, happy to let someone else do the work. Jax angled his body, blocking Salty's view. I watched. My breath held. Jax's huge hands were surprisingly delicate. He reached deep inside, past the wires and the glowing tubes. He didn't just jiggle a record. He was feeling for something. Ah, he grunted. There's your problem. Someone's stash. He pulled his hand out. He was holding a small, gray lead tray, the kind used for holding spare screws. It was taped to the inside of the casing with a strip of bright, unmistakable yellow electrical tape. Citrine-colored tape. In the tray was a single, tiny black square, a micro SD card. Jax palmed it, smooth as a card shark, and in the same motion pulled a small flask from his own pocket and handed it to Salty. For your trouble. Salty's eyes lit up. He took the flask, forgot all about the jukebox, and went back to his bar. We have it, Jax said, his voice a low rumble. And at that exact second, every light in the neon buoy went out. It wasn't a blown fuse. It was absolute, sudden, suffocating blackness. The bubbling jukebox died. The pink neon sign outside went dead. Even the exit sign over the back door vanished. Down, Rumi's voice hissed. Something hard and fast slammed into the front door, splintering the wood. It wasn't a knock. It was a battering ram. Shadows poured into the bar. They were shapes, blacker than the darkness, moving fast, carrying long, thin objects. A hand grabbed the front of my jacket. I screamed. It's me. Don't make a sound, Rumi whispered in my ear. She yanked me backwards, pulling me with surprising strength behind the padded vinyl of the DJ booth. We fell to the floor, the sticky carpet smelling like bleach and old beer. From the back booth, there was, I can only describe it as a lack of sound. There were no gunshots, no grunts, no loud thuds of body blows. There was just movement. I saw a shadow one of the Skarnov men raise his weapon, a long stick or pipe. Another shadow Silas intercepted him. It was like watching water flow around a rock. There was a sound like wet laundry being snapped, a thwack, and the man just folded. He didn't cry out. He just collapsed. Another man lunged, and Silas was no longer there. He was behind him, and there was a short, sharp crack of bone on bone, and the second man went down. It was fast. It was efficient. It was brutal and clean, and it took less than 5 seconds. He wasn't a brawler. He was a surgeon. More men were coming through the broken door. They'd realized their friends were down. They fanned out, their flashlights cutting white, panicked beams through the darkness. They're blocking the exit, Jax growled from somewhere near the stage. A beam of light swept over our hiding place. Got him? A voice yelled. Rumi pushed me down, but the man was already on us, grabbing at her. My heart was going to explode. I was useless. I was just a waitress. I was just a waitress. And I knew this bar. I knew every inch of it. I knew that under the DJ booth, right by my left hand, was the safety equipment. My fingers, numb and shaking, Found the cold metal cylinder, the fire extinguisher. I didn't think, I just reacted. I grabbed the extinguisher, ripped the pin out with a squeal of metal, and stood up. "Hey!" I screamed. The flashlight beam hit my face, blinding me. I squeezed the handle. A massive, choking white cloud of CO2 exploded into the bar. It hit the man, grabbing Rumi, and he howled, not in pain but in sheer, suffocating surprise. The cloud hit the other men. It filled the room instantly, a dense, freezing fog that smelled like chemicals. The flashlights were useless. The beams just reflected off the white chaos. Men were coughing, yelling, stumbling into tables. "Now," Silas's voice cut through the pandemonium. Rumi grabbed my hand, Jax grabbed my other arm, and we were moving. We ran, blind, through the cloud of our own making, toward the back exit. The fog was so thick I couldn't see, but Silas was in front of us. We burst through the emergency exit, setting off an alarm that was immediately drowned by the sound of the rain, which had started up again. We were in a narrow, wet alley. "This way," Jax yelled, pulling us toward a large, white delivery truck parked on the curb. The side of it read, "Port Halcyon Dry Ice and Provisions." He ripped open the back door. Rumi and I scrambled into the dark. Metal box, Silas and Jax piled in after us. The truck's engine was already running. A man one of Skarnov's burst from the alley, his face pale and covered in extinguisher foam. He raised a handgun. Silas grabbed something from the floor of the truck, a heavy block of dry ice wrapped in canvas. He threw it. He didn't throw it at the man. He threw it on the wet ground in front of him. The block hit the pavement and exploded in a dense, boiling cloud of white vapor. The gunman vanished inside it. Jax was already in the driver's seat. He slammed the truck into gear, and we peeled out, the tires screaming. I was in the back, sitting on a metal pallet, shaking. The back of the truck was freezing, the air thick with the sharp, metallic smell of carbon dioxide. Wisps of white fog curled around our feet from the insulated containers. Rumi was already at work. She had a small, specialized laptop. She'd produced a card reader from her jacket and slid the tiny micro SD card into it. "Talk to me." "Jax," Silas said. He was standing, braced against the wall of the truck, wiping extinguisher residue from his face. "We got a tail," Jax said, his eyes on the side mirror. "Black sedan, not Harbor Watch, Skarnov's personal muscle." "Lose it," Silas ordered. The truck swerved hard, throwing me against Rumi. I heard the sedan honk, its engine roaring, trying to keep up. "Got a new problem," Jax called out, his voice tight. "Just got a push notification from an official source, a Bureau of Maritime Integrity, the BMI. I'd never heard of it. "They just issued a citywide bulletin," Jax said. "A red notice for the known associates of the Orchid Syndicate. For questioning in matters of port security, it has our pictures. Silas, yours, mine, Rumi's." "It's a ghost," Silas said, his voice deadly. The truck lights flickered as we hit a pothole, illuminating the hard lines of his face. Skarnov couldn't get the real feds, so he built his own. He's using the BMI to legitimize a citywide manhunt. He's not just trying to arrest us. He's trying to make it legal. "I'm in," Rumi whispered. We both looked at her. The laptop screen cast a blue glow on her face. "He was sloppy," she said. "The encryption is good. 3 layers, but he used a standard algorithm. Theo must have just pulled the card and hidden it. He never tried to access it himself." The screen filled with lines of text, columns of numbers, names. "Silas," Rumi said, her voice unsteady for the first time. "It's all of it. Every shipment of contraband amber for the last 5 years. Every route, every bribe." She scrolled. "It's not just Skarnov, it's city councilmen, Port Authority officials, 2 judges." She looked at me, her eyes wide in the gloom. "Marin, this ledger lists the names of 3 Port Halcyon police captains." I stared at the screen. The names, the dates, the dollar amounts. It wasn't just a logbook. It wasn't just a list. It was a kill switch for the entire city, and I was holding it in a freezing truck, with the fake police and the real-deal mob chasing us through the foggy, rain-slicked streets of Port Halcyon. Jax didn't lose the tail. He drove us into the heart of the Orchid Syndicate's territory, a maze of warehouses where every alley looked the same. The black sedan eventually gave up, vanishing into the fog. We swapped the dry ice truck for a nondescript gray van and drove for another 20 minutes, heading away from the water, up into the hills overlooking the port. The van stopped at a pair of high, wrought iron gates, completely overgrown with ivy. They looked like they hadn't been opened in a decade. Jax hit a button on the dash, and they swung open with a silent, hydraulic hiss, revealing a tunnel of ancient, weeping willow trees. We emerged into a clearing that felt like another climate. It was a massive, sprawling complex of Victorian glasshouses, steam rising from their roofs into the damp night air. The sign at the front, barely visible, read Oriole Nursery and Botanical Imports. It smelled of wet earth, citrus, and orchids. This was no simple safe house. This was a fortress disguised as a garden. We were hurried inside, not into an office, but directly into one of the greenhouses. The air was warm, thick, and humid, a shocking contrast to the cold, salty fog outside. Rows and rows of lemon and orange trees, heavy with fruit, stood in massive terracotta pots. The air was alive with the sound of circulating water. A woman was waiting for us, standing by a simple teak table. She was not a soldier like Jax or Rumi. She was older, maybe in her late 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored cream-colored blazer and dark slacks. Her silver blonde hair was pulled into a severe, perfect bun, and her smile, when she gave us one, was thin, bright, and had no warmth in it at all. It was the smile of a surgeon, or a blade. "Silas," she said, her voice crisp and clear, "you're late, and you've brought a stray." Her eyes flicked to me, assessed me, and dismissed me, all in 1/10 of a second. "Aurelia Fane," Silas said, ignoring the barb. He placed the laptop, which Rumi was still holding, on the table. "This is Marin Vale. She's not a stray. She's the asset. Rumi." Rumi plugged the laptop into a power source on the table. "It's the real thing. Aurelia. The complete citrine ledger. 5 years of Skarnov's unwashed laundry." Aurelia's thin smile widened by a fraction of an inch. "Well, isn't that a lovely surprise? We've been hunting this for 6 months." She tapped a long, manicured finger on the table. "The plan, then, is simple. We leak a copy." "A fake copy," Silas corrected her. "Something to muddy the waters." "No," Aurelia said, her voice hardening. "A real copy. We scrub our own clients from it, of course the 3 or 4 who are foolish enough to cross-pollinate. Then we leak the rest. We give it to the press, to the state police. We let Skarnov and his pet officials tear each other apart, a controlled burn." I looked at the screen, at the list of names, police captains, judges, city councilmen, and dozens of smaller names: dock foremen, shipping clerks, union reps, people who probably took a $100 bribe to look the other way, not knowing they were signing up to be part of this. "You can't," I said. Aurelia turned her head slowly to look at me, as if I were a piece of furniture that had just spoken. "I beg your pardon?" My voice was shaking, but I held her gaze. "You can't just release it. Those names, the small ones, the clerks, the foremen, they have families. Skarnov, he won't just fire them. He'll make them disappear to tie up loose ends. You'll be handing him a kill list. You'll get innocent people dragged into this." Aurelia's expression was one of mild amusement. "Innocence, my dear, is a luxury no one in Port Halcyon can afford. This is a war. There will be collateral damage." "No," I said again, louder this time. I looked at Silas. "You said you wanted order. That isn't order, that's just a different kind of chaos." A long, heavy silence filled the humid greenhouse. Jax was studying a lemon tree. Rumi was watching the laptop. Aurelia was watching Silas. And Silas was watching me. He nodded, a single, slow inclination of his head. "She's right. A public leak is messy. It burns the evidence we need, Skarnov will just cut his losses and vanish, and the rot inside the city government will just burrow deeper. The BMI is the real threat. It's the infrastructure. The BMI, Aurelia scoffed. A ghost agency. It's nothing. It's his new syndicate, Silas countered, his voice firm. He's wrapping his criminal enterprise in the flag. Aurelia. He's building an army with the appearance of legality. We don't need to just cut the head off the snake. We need to pull out its fangs. We need to expose the head of the BMI, not his street-level thugs. And how, she said, tapping her pen on the table. Do you propose we do that? We don't leak the ledger, Silas said. We use it as bait, the real ledger. We'll set a meet. Skarnov, or whoever is running this BMI, thinks they are the only ones who know its true value. They'll want it. They'll want it so badly, they'll come for it themselves. Aurelia's eyes narrowed. A trap. High risk. I like it. Where? The lighthouse bridge, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. At dawn. They all looked at me. It's neutral, I stammered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. It's the old drawbridge. It's isolated. Only 2 ways on or off. You can see anyone coming from a mile away. It's a place for an exchange. Silas nodded again, a flicker of something like approval in his eyes. The lighthouse bridge. At dawn. We'll leak it. A simple, untraceable text to one of Skarnov's known lieutenants. The girl Marin is terrified. She wants out. She'll trade the ledger for cash and a clean escape. They'll never believe it. Aurelia said, They will, Rumi interjected, her fingers flying across the keyboard, because the text will come from her brother's phone. The plan clicked into place with terrifying speed. Within an hour, Rumi had used Theo's phone signal, which was still bouncing off a tower in the warehouse district, to send the text. We waited. The response came 2 hours later. A single word agreed. He bit, Silas said. The proof came an hour after that. Jax had a wideband radio scanner. We listened as the fake Bureau of Maritime Integrity started dispatching units. Their voices, crisp and professional, echoed in the greenhouse. All units establish a pre-dawn perimeter. Sector 7, Lighthouse Bridge. We are anticipating inclement weather. Full containment protocol. He's using his official ghost channel, Silas said, a cold, thin smile touching his lips. He hit a button on a digital recorder, and we are recording every word of it. Proof the BMI is a private, coordinated force. We had about 12 hours until dawn. Jax went to coordinate surveillance on the bridge. Aurelia vanished to manage the assets, whatever that meant. Silas went to a private office to make calls. I was left with Rumi in the warm, humid air of the greenhouse. I couldn't sit still. I was pacing, my sneakers squeaking on the damp tile floor. I was the bait. I was the one who had to walk onto that bridge. You're breathing too high, Rumi said, not looking up from her laptop. You're pulling from your chest. You'll pass out. I can't, I stammered. I can't stop shaking. What if they just... Rumi shut the laptop. She stood up and faced me. Breathe with me. What? Breathe. In through your nose for a count of 4. Hold it for a count of 4. Out through your mouth for a count of 6. The long exhale is what matters. It tricks your brain. It slows the heart. Do it now. I did it. In. 1, 2, 3, 4. My chest felt tight. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. The pressure was building. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The air hissed through my teeth. Again, and she commanded. We did it 5 times, 10 times. The shaking in my hands didn't stop, but it eased. The black spots in my vision receded. You're not a soldier, Marin, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Don't try to be what you are, a waitress. You watch people. You listen. You anticipate what they want before they know it. That's your skill. Use it tomorrow. Don't be a warrior. Be a witness. Just before the sky began to turn from black to a deep, bruised purple, Silas found me. He was holding a small black box. I don't like bait, he said, his voice low, but you're right. It's the only way. He opened the box. Inside, On a bed of velvet was a can of pepper spray, a high-frequency personal whistle, and a simple, black digital watch. "The spray is for close range," he said, handing it to me. "The whistle is loud enough to shatter glass. Use it if you're grabbed, but this," he tapped the watch, "this is the most important, the side button. Press it once, and my entire team hears everything within 50 feet. Press it twice, and it sends a silent distress signal. Don't use it unless you're sure. It means we move, and the plan is over." I strapped the watch to my wrist. It felt heavier than an anchor. "There's one more piece," he said. "The real harbor watch." I thought they were Skarnov's. "The fake one, yes. The real one," he said, "is a neighborhood patrol, started by the wives and mothers of the dock workers. They have no weapons, just clipboards, cell phones, and they see everything. They hate Skarnov more than I do." The plan was brilliant. The real harbor watch. A group of about 20 middle-aged women had agreed to conduct a safety drill at the fish market, which was right at the base of the bridge's on-ramp. They would form a human wall, a civilian buffer. Skarnov and his fake BMI couldn't just open fire on a crowd of mothers with cameras. They would be forced to expose themselves, to move around the civilians, giving Jax's snipers a clear view. Dawn came. The fog was thick, rolling off the water, clinging to the steel girders of the lighthouse bridge. It was perfect. The fog would hide Jax and Rumi in their positions. Aurelia met us at the base of the bridge. "A change of plans," she said, her voice brisk. "Marin, you're not walking the bridge." I stared at her. "What? But I'm the bait." "You're too valuable and too vulnerable. You'll stay here, in the van, with me. We'll send someone else, someone expendable." She gestured, and one of her men, a low-level guy I didn't recognize, stepped forward, holding the decoy bag. "No," Silas said, his voice flat. "It's not a request, Silas," Aurelia snapped. "It's an operational decision. Your judgment is compromised. You're too close to the asset. She stays." I looked at Silas, and for the first time, I saw him hesitate. It was just a flicker, a half-second of indecision. He looked at me, then at Aurelia, then at the bridge. He was weighing the options, the mission or me. That flicker of doubt chilled me more than the morning fog. He finally gave a short, sharp nod. "Fine, but the comms stay live. Marin stays with me. We watch from here." "As you wish," Aurelia said, turning away. The decoy man started his long, lonely walk onto the bridge, the decoy bag in his hand. He was just a silhouette in the mist. We waited. The bridge was silent, except for the cry of gulls and the distant clang of a buoy. Then, from the fog on the other side, a figure emerged. Not Skarnov, not his thugs from the diner. This person was tall, thin, and wearing a long, official-looking trench coat. They moved with a purpose, with the confidence of federal authority. "Who is that?" I whispered. "That's him," Silas said, his voice a low growl. He was watching through a pair of high-powered binoculars. "That's our man." The figure in the coat met the decoy in the middle of the bridge. They took the bag. They didn't check it. They just tucked it under their arm and turned to leave. "We have a positive ID," Rumi's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Facial recognition is a match. Ezra Lorne, listed as a special agent with the Bureau of Maritime Integrity." "Got him," Silas said, a cold smile of triumph spreading across his face. "We have him, and we have the recording. It's over." "Spring the trap," Aurelia ordered. "Jax, take him." "Negative." Jax's voice came back, tight with frustration. "I've lost the shot. He's not following the exit path. He's taking the maintenance ladder. Down, not across." "What?" Silas grabbed his own binoculars. Ezra Lorne was climbing over the side of the bridge, disappearing down a rusted ladder that led to the water. "He's running," Rumi said. "He's got a boat waiting. Someone tipped him. He knew the exit was covered." "How?" I whispered, watching the spot where he'd vanished. How could he possibly know? Silas lowered the binoculars. He wasn't looking at the bridge anymore. He was looking at Aurelia, who was already on her phone, her back to us, barking orders. He didn't say anything, but I saw it. The plan had been perfect, and it had failed. Lorne had escaped, and the only way he could have known the escape route was if someone on our side, someone who knew the trap, had told him. The mood in the gray van was colder than the dry ice truck had been. Aurelia was in another vehicle, coordinating the fallout. Jax drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Rumi sat in the back, silent, staring at the encrypted data on her laptop, her face pale. Silas just watched the city lights blur past, his face a mask of stone. He knew. I knew he knew. He knew the trap was sabotaged from the inside. That hesitation I saw on the bridge wasn't indecision about my safety. It was him realizing Aurelia was already one step ahead, that she was changing the plan to control the outcome, to warn her asset. Ezra Lorne was gone, and Aurelia Fane, Silas's trusted chief of staff, had let him go. We drove for another 10 minutes, ending up in the old shipbuilding district, a graveyard of half-finished hulls and rusting cranes. Jax pulled the van into a cavernous, dark building, the sign hanging by one hinge, read Sunreef Boatworks. It smelled of old sawdust, fiberglass resin, and the low-tide salt of the harbor. This wasn't a base. This was a bolt hole. Jax and Rumi immediately set up a perimeter, disappearing into the shadows of the massive workshop, their footsteps echoing. They were professionals, resetting after a blown operation. That left me and Silas. We were alone in the center of the vast space, under a single, bare work light that cast long, spider-like shadows. Rain began to drum against the high tin roof, a hard, steady rhythm, different from the soft hiss in the greenhouse. This was an angry sound. I was shaking again, not from the cold, from the rage. "She played you," I said, my voice quiet, but it carried in the huge room. Silas turned to look at me. The single light carved his face out of the darkness. "Yes. That man, Lorne, he got away, because of her, because your chief of staff is the one running him. She is the BMI, isn't she?" "It would seem so," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "And you knew on the bridge, when she changed the plan, when you hesitated. You knew it was a setup." "I suspected," he said. "I didn't know. Suspecting an old friend and proving a betrayal are two different things." "So what happens now?" I demanded, my voice rising. I paced away from him, rubbing my arms. "She's out there. She has the fake BMI, she has Lorne, and she knows you're onto her. She knows about me." "We have this ledger," I pointed at the laptop Rumi had left on a workbench, "and it's useless because the one person we were trying to catch is the one who was standing right next to us." I was vibrating with a fear so deep it felt like anger. I stopped and faced him. "How many more secrets are in your pocket, Silas?" I asked, my voice raw. "How many more people in your syndicate are just waiting to sell us out? How deep does this go?" He watched me, his expression unreadable. He took a step closer into the small circle of yellow light. "Just enough to survive," he said. The answer was so simple, so honest. It broke something in me. The anger vanished, and all that was left was the bone-deep terror. I was just a waitress. 24 hours ago. My biggest problem was $350 in back rent. Now I was standing in a shipyard, a target for a ghost army, with the one man who was supposed to be in control admitting he was just as blindsided as I was. My legs felt weak. I leaned back against a wooden workbench, the rough sawn pine digging into my back. "I'm scared," I whispered, and I hated the sound of it. "I'm not just scared of them. Skarnov, Aurelia, Lorne, I'm scared of this." I gestured between us. "This feeling, this relying on you." I looked at my hands, which were picking at a splinter on the bench. All my life, I've been the one holding things together. My mom's bills, Theo's messes, the rent. I'm the one who fixes things. I'm the one who's strong. And since I met you, all I've been is weak. The person who gets rescued, the bait, the asset. I hate it. It makes me feel small, and I'm terrified that I'm starting to get used to it. I finally looked up at him. He hadn't moved. He was just listening. He took another step, closing the distance between us until he was standing just a foot away. He was tall, and he loomed in the dim light, but he didn't feel threatening. He just felt present. "Protecting you doesn't make you weak, Marin," he said, his voice so low it was almost lost in the sound of the rain drumming on the roof. "It gives you the space to be strong when it matters." He paused, his eyes searching mine. "You were strong in the diner. You were strong in your apartment. You were strong in that karaoke bar. You saved us with that fire extinguisher. You're the one who found the flaw in Aurelia's plan. That's not weakness." He was so close. The air between us was thick, charged with the smell of the rain and the salt from the sea. My heart was hammering, but it wasn't from fear. Not anymore. It was something else. "You're not weak," he said again, a hoarse whisper. "You're just tired. You've been strong for too long." He didn't move. He just watched me. He was giving me the choice. He was giving me the space. And in that space, I leaned in, just an inch. It was all he needed. He moved slowly, no sudden movements. He raised his hand, not to grab me, but just to rest it on the workbench next to my head, boxing me in, but not touching me. "Can I?" he whispered. His voice was rough. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. His other hand came up, his fingers brushing the hair back from my face. His touch was hesitant, almost respectful. "Are you sure, Moran?" he asked again, his eyes locked on mine. He was asking. He was really, truly asking, not assuming, not taking. "Yes," I breathed. He lowered his head, and the first kiss was impossibly soft. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not like in the movies. It was a question. It was just the gentle press of his lips against mine. A moment of stillness while the rain hammered the world outside. He tasted like coffee and salt and something metallic, like the night itself. I let out a breath I had been holding for my entire life, and my hands, which had been clenched into fists at my sides. Unclenched, I lifted one, my fingers trembling, and rested it on his chest. I could feel his heart beating a steady, strong rhythm under my palm. My nod of encouragement was all he needed. The kiss deepened, and this time, it was a release. It was all the fear and the adrenaline and the exhaustion of the last 2 days, melting into something warm and urgent. His hand moved from the bench to my waist, pulling me away from the rough wood and flush against him. It was a safe hold, a solid hold. His other hand slid from my face to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, tilting my head. My heart was a runaway train, my breath catching in my throat. His was just as unsteady. I could feel the warmth of his skin through the thin material of his shirt. He wasn't the cold, iron-hard Mafia boss. He was just a man, warm and real and breathing. The sound of the rain on the tin roof seemed to get louder, faster, matching the rhythm of my pulse. He moved, shifting us both until my back was against the solid, smooth hull of a half-finished boat. The wood was cool against my skin, a contrast to the heat radiating from him. His lips left mine, trailing a line of fire down my jaw, to the sensitive skin of my throat. I gasped, my head falling back, my fingers gripping his shirt. Every touch was a question. His hand sliding from my waist to my hip, my hand moving from his chest to his shoulder. It was a dance, a silent conversation in the dark. There was no rush. There was no pressure. There was just the drumming rain, the smell of salt and sawdust, and the overwhelming, grounding certainty of his touch. He wasn't taking anything from me. He was sharing. He was pouring his own tightly controlled tension into me, and I was giving him all my fear in return. And just as the heat threatened to consume us, to burn away that last thread of control, a sudden, loud slap of a wave hit the seawall outside the boathouse. It was so loud it broke the spell. We both flinched, and then, a second later, we laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a short, breathless huff of air, a shared release of the impossible tension. He didn't pull away completely. He just rested his forehead against mine, his breathing still ragged. I kept my hands on his chest, feeling his heart gradually slow down. "Don't," I whispered, my eyes still closed. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Silas, don't tell me I'll be safe. Don't tell me it's going to be okay." I felt him nod, his forehead moving against mine. "I won't," he murmured, his voice thick. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his hands still resting lightly, safely, on my hips. "I'll make you one, just one." He waited until I opened my eyes. "I'll be there when you call." It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. It wasn't a promise of forever. It was a promise of now. I smiled, a real tired smile. "Okay, I can—" Beep, beep! The sound was sharp, violent in the quiet. It wasn't my phone. It was Rumi's. She had left it on the workbench, wired into her laptop. Silas was across the room in a second, his entire demeanor changing. The warmth was gone, replaced by the iron-hard boss. He hit the speaker button. It was Jack's. His voice was tinny and tight with panic. "Rumi, Silas, I was running surveillance on Theo's last known locations. Skarnov's men, they found him. They found him." I went rigid. The warmth from Silas's touch turned to ice water in my veins. "What, where?" Silas grabbed my hand, his grip crushing. Jax's voice was grim. "They're not being gentle. They're dragging him into a van. I got the plates. They're headed for the cold storage district." He paused, and the sound of his breathing was the only thing on the line. "They're taking him to Ice Warehouse 12. I froze. My blood stopped. My lungs stopped. Silas's grip on my hand tightened. Pulling me back from the edge, I looked at him, my eyes wide with a new, sharper terror than any I had felt before. He didn't hesitate. Not for a fraction of a second. He looked me straight in the eye, his own gaze clear and hard as diamonds. "We're going to get your brother." The intimacy of the boathouse evaporated like sea spray on hot glass. The drive to the cold storage district was silent, a hard, cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Jax drove the gray van, his eyes scanning every intersection. Rumi was in the back with me, her laptop open, but she wasn't typing. She was just watching me. Silas sat in the passenger seat, a perfect statue of iron and intent. The warmth he'd shown me, the vulnerability in his voice, was gone, locked away. The boss was back. Ice. Warehouse 12 was a concrete monolith near the water, a place where the fishing trawlers flash froze their catch. The air outside already felt 10 degrees colder. A single, sickly blue fluorescent light flickered above a metal loading dock, casting everything in the rhythm of a dying pulse. And under that light, I saw him, Theo. He was on his knees, his hands tied to a steel railing, his head was bowed. Standing over him, smoking a cigarette, was a man I recognized from the diner, the one with the greasy hair, and beside him, looking bored, was Ezra Lorne. But the man in the center, the one Lorne was clearly reporting to, was new. He was built like a heavyweight boxer, wearing an absurdly expensive wool coat despite the damp. His face was a mask of scar tissue, and he was smiling. This had to be Skarnov. "They're not waiting," Jax said, parking the van in the deep shadow of a neighboring warehouse. "It's a trap. Silas, they're not even trying to hide it." "Of course it's a trap," Silas said. He pulled the micro SD card from Rumi's laptop, the real ledger. He tucked it into his own pocket. "They think I'm sentimental. They think I'll trade an empire for a terrified girl's brother. They're right about the trade. They're wrong about the price." He got out of the van. "Silas, no," I whispered, grabbing for the door. He looked back, his face unreadable. "Stay here, Rumi. Lock the doors." He walked out into the flickering blue light, his hands empty, held away from his sides. Skarnov saw him and laughed, a barking sound that echoed off the concrete. Silas Armand in the flesh, come to beg for the little dock rat. Silas stopped about 20 feet from the platform. "The boy for the ledger, a clean trade." "The ledger," Skarnov bellowed. "You mean my property? The thing your new waitress stole for you." He gestured to Ezra Lorne. Agent Lorne here tells me you've been a very busy man, trying to build a case. Very noble." "The ledger for the boy," Silas repeated, his voice flat. "I'm a man of acquisitions." "Armand," Skarnov sneered, "I don't trade. I'll take my ledger, and I'll take the boy. And, just for the insult, I think I'll take your life." Skarnov snapped his fingers. 4 men stepped out of the shadows on the loading dock, raising their weapons. And then, the night exploded. Crash! 2 black vans, the kind Aurelia used, slammed into the loading dock from the other end of the street, their headlights blinding everyone. Men in tactical gear, the same uniforms from the bridge, piled out. "Orchid Syndicate, drop your weapons," a voice yelled. It was Aurelia. She was on the roof of the warehouse across from us, dressed in black, a rifle in her hand, directing her team. A rescue. My heart leaped. Silas had called her. He'd brought his own army. But as the chaos erupted, as Aurelia's team opened up on Skarnov's men, I saw it. Ezra Lorne didn't duck for cover. He didn't pull his weapon on Aurelia's men. He ran towards Skarnov, grabbed him by the arm, and pulled him to safety, shielding him with his own body. He was shouting orders, not at Aurelia's men, but with them. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a rescue. It wasn't a two-sided fight. It was a merger. Aurelia's raid was a lie. She was here to finalize the deal, to eliminate Silas, and to take the ledger for her new partner, Skarnov. The BMI wasn't just a shell. It was the new name for Skarnov's entire operation, and Aurelia was its queen. "It's a pincer," Rumi said, her voice tight with fury. "They're trapping him. Jax." "I see it," Jax snarled. He slammed the van into reverse, spinning us into a parallel alley. "They're trying to flush him out." I didn't care. I didn't care about Aurelia, or Skarnov, or the ledger. My eyes were on Theo, who was still tied to the railing, abandoned in the middle of the firefight. "Get me closer," I told Jax, "the sidewall, by those wooden crates." "Marin, no, it's too hot." "Get me closer," I screamed. Jax swore, but he did it, maneuvering the van behind a stack of empty pallets. "Go, Rumi. Cover her." Rumi and I were out the door, moving low. The air was filled with sharp cracks and the smell of gunpowder. The fog from the dry ice plant was thicker here, clinging to the ground like a low, white cloud, mixing with the smoke. It gave us cover. I kept my head down, my breath sawing in my lungs. Rumi moved beside me, a pistol in her hand, her eyes scanning the rooftops. We scrambled behind a pile of wooden shipping crates, just yards from the loading dock. I could see Theo clearly now. He was shaking, his eyes squeezed shut. "Theo," I hissed. His head snapped up. "Marin, get out of here, it's a trap." "I'm not leaving you." I crawled the last few feet. The railing he was tied to was cold, slick with frost. His hands were bound with thick, plastic zip ties, pulled so tight his fingers were blue. I clawed at them, my nails useless. I can't break them. My pocket, the apron, my old life. I fumbled in the pocket of the jeans I was wearing. I hadn't changed since the diner. Not really. I'd just thrown on a new shirt. My fingers closed around something small and metal. My old apron, no. I'd stuffed it in my jacket pocket from 2 nights ago. It was a small, cheap paring knife with a yellow plastic handle, the one I used to slice lemons and limes at the Blue Gull, a tool so insignificant I'd forgotten I even had it. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. "Hold still, Theo! Hold still!" I sawed at the thick plastic. The knife was dull, but it was sharp enough. The first tie snapped, then the second. Theo's hands were free. He grabbed my jacket, his eyes wild with terror. "Marie, you have to listen. You have to—" "We have to go," I pulled at him. "No. Listen, the jukebox, it wasn't the real thing. It was a decoy." "What?" "Lorne, it was Lorne," he choked out, his words tumbling over each other. "He knew I'd get caught. He wanted you to find the card, to lead Silas to it." "Theo, what are you talking about?" "The card is real," he gasped. "But it's locked. It's the final layer. I heard them talking, Aurelia and Lorne. It needs a key. A key? What key? The Oriole key, he cried. The music. Maureen, the music you were playing. My mind flashed back to the greenhouse, to the waiting. Rumi had a small antique spinet piano in the corner to keep my hands from shaking. I had sat down and picked out a simple, sad tune I'd known since childhood, a 5-note melody, a E, D, F sharp. The piano, I whispered. It's the password, Theo said. That sequence of notes, it unlocks the rest of the ledger, the real list, the international accounts, not just the local cops. A bullet ricocheted off the steel rail above our heads, showering us with sparks. We're moving, Rumi yelled, firing 2 shots toward the roof. I pulled Theo to his feet. He was weak, his legs buckling. I looked for Silas. He was in trouble. He was pinned behind a stack of frozen fish pallets. Ezra Lorne was advancing on him, using a metal container as a shield. Then I saw Aurelia. She was on the catwalk above them. She raised her rifle. Silas, cover, she yelled. She fired. A shot kicked up concrete 2 feet to Lorne's left, making him duck. Then she fired again. A shot hit the pallet right next to Silas's head, forcing him to duck back. My blood went cold. She wasn't providing cover. She was a stage manager. She was choreographing the fight. She was keeping them both pinned, keeping Silas from escaping, keeping Lorne from winning. She was playing them against each other, waiting for them both to be weak enough for her to take them out. I had to do something. The tools Silas had given me, the pepper spray was useless. The watch. The whistle, the high-frequency whistle. It's loud enough to shatter glass. I ripped it from my jacket pocket. I put it to my lips and blew with every ounce of air in my lungs. I couldn't hear a thing, but Skarnov, Lorne, and Aurelia, all 3 of them, screamed. They dropped their weapons and clawed at their earpieces, their comms suddenly shrieking with unbearable, weaponized feedback. "What was that?" Theo yelled, covering his own ears. "The real harbor watch." I said, "It was the signal. Silas's plan, the mothers and wives of the dock workers, positioned in the streets around the warehouse. They weren't fighters. They were a communications blackout. They were blasting air horns, sirens, and static over a hijacked radio frequency, flooding the comms channel Aurelia and Skarnov were using. In that moment of chaos, their entire network was blind and deaf. "Now, Silas!" I screamed. Silas didn't hesitate. He burst from cover, hitting Lorne with a low, driving tackle. He didn't stop to fight, he just neutralized the threat, sending Lorne crashing into a steel drum, and kept moving. "Jack's the car," Silas roared. Jack's was already there, the gray van's side door sliding open, but Rumi was pulling us in another direction. No, this way. They compromised the van. She dragged us toward the main container yard, the backup. The backup was a vehicle I would never have noticed. A 30-year-old, wood-paneled station wagon. It was ugly, and it looked like it belonged to a soccer mom. Rumi threw open the back door. "Get in, get in!" We piled in, me, Theo, then Silas. Jax ran from the van and jumped into the driver's seat. Rumi got in the passenger side. The second the doors closed, the world lit up. Aurelia and Skarnov's men had recovered. They realized we were escaping. They opened fire. The sound was deafening. Not the crack of gunfire, but the sound of a hailstorm. Ping, ping, tink, thwack. The glass didn't shatter. It starred. It cracked into 1,000 spider webs, but it held. The station wagon was a tank. Jax stomped on the gas. The car, heavier than it looked, fishtailed on the wet pavement and shot out of the container yard, bullets hammering against the steel-plated tailgate like angry fists. We were safe, for now. We sped through the dark streets of the port. Theo was in the back with me, shivering, coughing. He was crying, deep, ragged sobs. "Mari, I'm so sorry." He wept, his face buried in his hands. It was Lorne. He found out I'd been skimming from the crates, just small stuff. He said he'd make it all go away. He just needed a favor. He said to grab the music box. He said it was just an old antique, a collector's item he wanted. He swore he'd hurt you if I didn't. I didn't know. Mari. I swear to God, I didn't know it was a ledger. I looked at Silas, who was in the front seat, checking his own weapon. I expected him to rage, to yell at Theo for starting this whole nightmare. Silas was quiet for a long time. He turned, his face cast in the shadows of the speeding car, and looked at my brother. His expression was hard, exhausted, and gray. "Survive first," Silas said, his voice flat. "We'll sort out the blame later." I just held my brother's hand. I looked out the back window, which was a mosaic of fractured, starred glass. I could just see the flickering blue light of Ice Warehouse 12, growing smaller in the distance. We had escaped. We had Theo. We had the ledger, and now, thanks to him, we had the key. But Aurelia was still out there, and she knew exactly what we had. I pressed my hand against the cold, damaged glass, feeling the thrum of the engine. The final fight hadn't been avoided. It had just been postponed. We didn't go back to the boathouse. We didn't go to any of Silas's known locations. We went back to the one place Aurelia would never expect us to return, the Oriole greenhouse. She knows this place. Jax growled as he parked the armored station wagon in a hidden alcove, covering it with camouflage netting. "This is her ground." "Which is why she won't be looking for us here," Silas countered, his voice flat and dead. "She thinks we're running. She's hunting. She won't check her own nest." He was right. The greenhouse was empty, the air still and warm, smelling of damp earth and citrus, but it felt different. The humidity no longer felt like a comfort. It felt like a shroud. The whole place was a lie. Theo was pale, wrapped in a thermal blanket Rumi had found, sipping hot water. His hands were still raw from the zip ties. Jack stood by the only entrance, a shadow among the lemon trees. Rumi had her laptop on the teak table, the one where Aurelia had smiled her blade-thin smile. "Theo," she said, her voice brittle. "You're sure the key?" "I think so," he stammered. "I heard them. Lorne and her, they were laughing. Lorne said the old man's pet project, the piano, would be the final key. He said it was poetic. And he mentioned the tune, the sad little tune Marin always plays." My eyes went to the small spinet piano in the corner, the one I'd idly played while Rumi was teaching me to breathe. I walked over to it. The keys were cool. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a cold, focused rage. "Marin," Silas said, his voice quiet. I didn't look at him. I sat on the small bench. I put my fingers on the keys. I thought of my mom, of Theo, of the diner, of the last 48 hours, and I played. It was just a few notes, a simple, melancholic progression I'd learned as a child. A, E, D, F sharp minor. "Again," Rumi said, her fingers poised over the keyboard. I played it again. The notes hung in the humid air, sounding less like music and more like a code. AEDFM, Rumi typed. "It's an alphanumeric sequence, a passkey. It's accepting it." The laptop screen, which had shown the list of local corrupt officials, flickered. That file vanished, replaced by a new, deeper directory. This wasn't a list of bribes. This was a corporate structure, offshore accounts, coded shipping manifests, wire transfers from shell corporations in 3 different countries. And at the very bottom, a single, encrypted executive file, BMI_charter_alpha. Rumi clicked it. The file unlocked. It was a certificate of incorporation, filed in Delaware 6 months ago, the founding charter for the Bureau of Maritime Integrity. "She built an army," Jax breathed, reading over Rumi's shoulder. "A fully legal, private military, funded by Skarnov's money." "Who signed it?" Silas asked. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the greenhouse. "Who's the primary shareholder?" Rumi's face went white. She didn't speak. She just stared at the screen, her hand trembling so badly she couldn't control the mouse. "Rumi," Silas commanded. Rumi just shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I can't." I stood up and walked over. I leaned in and read the name listed under Sole Proprietor and Chief Executive Officer. "Aurelia Fane," I read aloud. The name hung in the air, heavy and toxic. It wasn't Lorne. It wasn't Skarnov. They were listed on a secondary page as operational directors. This entire nightmare, the BMI, the surveillance, the hunt, it was all her. She wasn't just a traitor working with the enemy. She was the enemy. Jax let out a string of curses, low and vicious, kicking the leg of the teak table. Theo just looked small and confused. Silas didn't move. He stood, his back to us, looking up at the glass panels of the roof, where the pre-dawn light was just starting to turn the sky a sick gray color. He let out a long, slow breath that seemed to drain all the life from him. Then he nodded, once. "I suspected," he said, his voice hollow. "At the bridge, when she changed the plan, it was too logical, too clean. It wasn't to protect you. It was to protect Lorne, to make sure her primary asset escaped, but I had no proof. I couldn't move against her on a hunch." He turned. The weariness I'd seen in him at my apartment, the exhaustion I'd seen at the boathouse, it was all gone. All that was left was something cold and final. I felt a different kind of pain, a sharp, personal sting. "She taught me how to breathe," I whispered. "The woman who was trying to kill me, she gave me soup. She told me to eat." Rumi finally broke. She slammed the laptop shut. "No!" she cried, her voice cracking. It can't be. She saved my life. In Riga, 5 years ago, I was pinned down. My team was gone. I was bleeding out. She came out of nowhere. She carried me 2 miles to an extraction point. She wouldn't do this. This is a fake. This is a plant." "People change. Rumi," Silas said, his voice hard as stone. "Or they just finally show you who they've always been. She wanted the port. All of it. Skarnov had the muscle. But he was chaotic. She offered him what he couldn't get himself: legitimacy. The BMI. A private army with a federal seal. She was cleaning house, getting rid of me, her only rival, and using Theo's mess as the perfect excuse to do it." "So we run," Jax said, pulling his weapon and checking the clip. "We grab the ledger and we vanish. We can regroup in Montreal." "No," Silas said. "We don't run. We end this." As if summoned, Rumi's laptop pinged a new message, not on a secure channel, on a wide-open commercial email server. Rumi opened it. It was from Aurelia. "I have your mother's hospital wing under surveillance. Marin. A terrible shame if there was a malfunction in the generator tonight. Bring me the unlocked ledger, Blackfin Ferry Terminal. Midnight. Come alone. We'll call it a bonfire of the vanities. Burn it all, and you, your mother, and your brother can walk away. I give you my word." My blood ran cold. The final, brutal move. "She's not just taking the ledger," Silas said, his voice a low growl. "She's cleaning the board. She'll burn the ferry, destroy the ledger, and get rid of you, the only witness who can tie her to it. Blame the whole thing on a Skarnov Orchid war. She walks away clean, in control, and a victim." "I'm going," I said. Silas, Jax, and Rumi all turned to me. "No," Silas said. "Yes." My voice didn't shake. "Look at the plan. She expects you," I said, looking at Silas. "She expects a tactical counter. She expects you to send Rumi, or Jax, or to come yourself. She's planned for that. She hasn't planned for me. She'll expect the terrified stray, the weak asset she taught to breathe, the girl who serves coffee." I took a step toward Silas. "People underestimate the weak. They underestimate the waitress. Aurelia told me herself the innocent are just collateral damage. She'll be watching for a soldier. She won't be watching me." Silas stared at me. I saw that same hesitation I'd seen on the bridge. But this time, it wasn't doubt in his plan. It was fear. Fear for me. "You told me," I said, my voice quiet, but hard as the steel on the loading dock. "You said protecting me gives me the space to be strong when it matters. It matters now. Silas, this is my family. This is my city she's threatening. I am the one walking onto that ferry." He studied my face for a long, agonizing second. He saw the woman from the diner was gone. He saw the fear was still there, but it was standing behind a wall of pure, cold steel. He nodded, a sharp, reluctant motion. "You're not the bait. Marin, you're the hunter. We'll build the trap around you." The energy in the greenhouse shifted. The grief was gone. replaced by a deadly focus. "What about Lorne?" Theo asked, his voice still shaky. "And Skarnov, they'll be there. She'll have her whole army." "Theo, you're staying here," I started. "No," he cut me off. Standing up, the blanket falling from his shoulders. "I have to do this. I started this. I can lure Lorne away. He thinks I'm a coward, He thinks I'm just a stupid kid who got in over his head. He's right. But I can use that. I'll send him a message. Tell him I kept an insurance policy. Something I copied before I hid the box. He'll believe it. He'll have to. I'll pull him to the container yard, away from the ferry." Silas looked at Theo, his gaze unsparing. "You do that. You're on your own. You're not on our comms. You're a civilian. You get spotted. You're a liability. You fail." He put a heavy hand on Theo's shoulder, and my brother flinched. "I'm carrying you out of there like a 50-pound sack of cement, understood?" Theo swallowed, his eyes wide with terror, but he nodded. "Understood." We worked fast. Rumi copied the unlocked ledger, the real one, the whole Aurelia file onto a new micro SD card. We needed a decoy. Jax fished in his pockets. "Here." He tossed a cheap, bright yellow plastic lighter onto the table. The brand name was unreadable, but the color was perfect. A citrine lighter. "Give it to me," I said. I took the lighter. Rumi handed me a blank SD card. For 10 minutes, I practiced. I practiced sliding the real card, the one with Aurelia's name on it, into the seam of my jacket sleeve, and I practiced, with the other hand, smoothly presenting the yellow lighter, the decoy card hidden inside its hollow bottom. It was a waitress's move, palming a tip, clearing a table without a sound. "Good," Silas said, watching my hands. "Now, the signal." "The watch is compromised," I said. "Aurelia gave it to me. She'll be listening." I held up the lighter. This is the signal. When I hand it to her, if I tap my index finger twice on the side, like this." I tapped it twice. A quick, nervous motion. "It means the trap is off. It means abort. She found me out." "No," Silas said, his voice firm. He took the lighter from me and placed it back in my hand. 2 taps means go. It means she's taken the bait. It means you are clear, and we move. You don't get to abort. Marin, you get to win." "Got it," I said, my hand closing around the plastic. 2 taps, go." "Aurelia is smart," Silas said, turning to the others. "She'll have snipers. She'll have the fake BMI blocking every street. We can't go in hard." "The harbor watch," Rumi said, her voice now cold and professional, the betrayal locked away. "The real ones, the mothers, they'll create a civilian buffer, a late-night vigil for port safety. They'll have their cell phones streaming. Aurelia won't fire on a crowd of civilians, not if she's trying to maintain her legal cover." "Good," Silas said. "They are the outer perimeter. Jax, Rumi, you take the maintenance crane overlooking the ferry slip. High ground. You are my eyes. You do not engage. Rumi, not you, not tonight. You are surgical. You take out their comms on my signal, and that's all. Jax, you are counter-sniper only." Rumi nodded, her face grim. "And you?" "Aurelia expects me on the rooftops," Silas said. "She'll be watching the high ground. She won't be watching the water." He looked toward the harbor. "The Blackfin terminal is old. The pilings are rotted. I'll be under the pier, in the ferry's slip. I'll be right under her feet." It was 11 p.m. Time to move. I walked past a panel of dark glass in the greenhouse, one that acted as a mirror in the dim light. I stopped. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her hair was a damp, tangled mess. Her eyes were dark, shadowed with an exhaustion that went bone deep. But they weren't scared. They weren't the eyes of the girl who was terrified of a $350 rent bill. That girl was gone. I looked down at my hand, the one holding the cheap yellow lighter. It was perfectly steady. The Blackfin ferry terminal wasn't a building. It was a skeleton. A rusting relic from when the port actually moved people instead of just cargo, before the new bridge made it obsolete. It was exactly midnight. The wind howled off the open water, a high-pitched, mournful sound that shrieked through the exposed steel girders. The whole pier groaned under my feet, a low, animal sound, as if the entire structure was trying to tear itself loose and drift out to sea. The rain wasn't falling, it was flying sideways, sharp as needles. The only light came from the tall, orange sodium lamps, the kind that make everyone look sick. They painted the slanted rain in greasy, flickering streaks. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. I could feel the real micro SD card, the one with Aurelia's name on it, tucked deep in the inner seam of my jacket sleeve. It was a tiny, sharp-cornered square digging into my skin. In my right hand, I gripped the cheap yellow plastic lighter. Behind me, hidden in the shadows of the long-dead fish market parking lot, I knew the real Harbor Watch 30. Maybe 40 mothers and grandmothers were huddled, their phones ready, their live streams waiting. She was exactly on time. Aurelia Fane emerged from the fog at the far end of the pier, walking with a calm, unhurried gait. She wore a stark white raincoat, the hood down, letting the wind and rain whip her silver blonde hair across her face. She looked serene, as if she were walking out to check the mail, not to commit treason and murder. She stopped 10 feet from me. Her smile was thin, bright, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Marin," she said, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the wind. "You came. I'm impressed." "You threatened my mother?" I said. My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't give her that. "I did," she acknowledged, as if discussing the weather. "And look, it worked." She tilted her head. "Thank you. You did what my men couldn't. You brought Silas to his knees. You found the key. You unlocked the final file." She held out her hand. A single pale palm. "You've brought me my gift." I didn't move. I just stared at her. "You have to let them go. My mother, Theo." "Of course," she said, her voice soothing. "A bonfire. Marin, we burn the ledger, we burn the ferry, a tragic accident. The evidence of Skarnov's and Silas's war is destroyed, and all the players, you, me, your family are free. A clean fire. Now please." I held out the yellow citrine lighter, the decoy. She took it, but she didn't look at it. She just balanced it on her open palm, weighing it. "It feels so light," she mused, a small, cold smile playing on her lips, for a secret that weighs as much as the entire city. I couldn't see him. I couldn't hear him, but I knew, 10 feet below my shoes. Silas was submerged in the cold, black, oil-slicked water under the pier. He was clinging to a rotted, cross-braced piling, breathing through a small rebreather, listening to every word through the tiny waterproof microphone I had clipped to my collar. I could almost feel his grip on the steel beam, his knuckles going white with rage. My eyes darted, just for a second, to the massive loading crane on the north side of the slip. It was a dark, skeletal shape against the gray, thundering sky. I'd seen the shadow when I arrived, a sniper. That had to be Lorne, Aurelia's pet agent, her overwatch. Suddenly, from the container yard 200 yards away, a streak of red light shot into the sky. A marine flare. It popped, a bright crimson star that illuminated the rows of wet, metal containers. And in that light, a single figure. Theo ran between two of them. The shadow on the crane shifted. Lorne had seen him. The shadow moved, leaving the perfect sniper's nest, descending the ladder. He was taking the bait. My brother, my terrified, stupid, brave brother, had done it. He'd pulled Lorne off the high ground. "He's gone," I said, my voice low and turning back to Aurelia. "It's just us." "Good," she said, unfazed. Why, I had to ask. Why, Aurelia? Why burn it all down? You had everything. You were his right hand. He trusted you. She laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was like breaking glass. Trust Silas trusts order. He's a traditionalist. He wants to manage the rot, prune the branches. He believes in a civilized underworld. But the old order is rotten. Marin. The entire system is a corpse. I needed a cleaner fire. She gestured to the dark water. I needed to burn the port down to its foundations. Skarnov, Silas, all of them. And then rebuild it. Properly, legally, under one authority, the Bureau of Maritime Integrity, my authority. She looked past me, toward the dark, hulking shape of the abandoned ferry. She raised her left hand, a signal to the men I couldn't see, the ones waiting with the accelerant. The bonfire was about to begin. This was it. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I leaned back against the rusted guardrail of the pier, trying to look casual, as if I were tired. My hand, the one not holding the lighter, tapped the cold, wet metal rail. Twice. The go signal, the one that meant she had taken the bait, that I was clear, that the trap was set. The world ended. Jax, from his position on the crane, hit the main breaker for the entire terminal. Every orange lamp on the pier, in the parking lot, on the street, every light went dead. We were plunged into absolute, disorienting darkness. The only light was a single, distant green beacon on a container ship, miles away. The wind howled. Thunder cracked directly overhead, as if the sky itself had split open. In the blackness, I heard a click, Aurelia's pistol. A muzzle flash illuminated her face, stark white and furious. She wasn't aiming at me. She was firing at the crane where Jax and Rumi were. She turned on me. "You little fool," she hissed. She lunged, grabbing the front of my jacket, her strength shocking. She pressed the hot, just-fired barrel of her pistol against my ribs. I could feel the heat sear through my thin jacket. But I wasn't the waitress from the Blue Gull. Not anymore. Rumi's voice was in my head. "Breathe out. Use their momentum. The wrist is the weak point." As she pushed, I didn't pull back. I went with her, and I twisted my wrist in a sharp, violent circle, striking the side of her gun with the heel of my hand, a waitress's move, turning a heavy, overloaded tray. The gun fired. The bullet went harmlessly up into the rain. From the side, a shape. Lorne. He must have realized Theo was a decoy. He was running at us, a long knife in his hand. He was on me in a second, But he never reached me. A form erupted from the water beneath the pier, tearing through a rotted canvas tarp like a creature from the deep. It was Silas. He was all water and shadow and speed. He met Lorne mid-stride. He didn't punch him. He didn't shoot him. He flowed around him, caught Lorne's extended knife arm, twisted, and a sickening, wet pop echoed across the pier. Lorne screamed, a high, thin sound, as Silas applied a perfect shoulder lock, dropping him to his knees, his arm useless, his knife clattering on the boards, neutralized. Aurelia snarled, letting me go. Realizing her gun was useless, she dropped it and I heard a click-click snick sound. A butterfly knife was in her hand. She was fast. She lunged, not at me, but at Silas's exposed back. "Oh, Rumi! No!" I screamed, thinking Rumi would shoot her. But Rumi was already there. She had dropped from the crane the second the lights went out, landing as silently as a cat. She didn't have a gun. She had a knife of her own. She met Aurelia's lunge. The two women who had been sisters in arms, they were a blur of black shadows. It wasn't a fight. It was a dance. It was the parry of steel, the sound of booted feet on the wet pier, the whipping of the wind. I could see Rumi's face, streaked with rain or maybe tears as she blocked the woman who had saved her life, her movements just as precise, just as deadly. This was my part. I scrambled away from the fight. On the ferry ramp, there was a charging station for an old, battery-powered megaphone. I grabbed it. My hands were shaking again, but I didn't care. I ripped my phone from my pocket, shoving the headphone jack into the megaphone's input. I hit play on the recording Silas had made, the recording of the fake BMI. My voice amplified 100 times, boomed across the water. No, not my voice, the BMI's voice. All units establish a pre-dawn perimeter. Sector 7, Lighthouse Bridge, full containment protocol. The voice echoed, distorted, monstrous. It was the signal. The chain-link fence at the parking lot burst open. It wasn't a raid. It was a flood. 30, then 40, then 50 people. The mothers, the wives, the grandfathers of the port, the real harbor watch. They weren't armed. They were holding cell phones, their screens bright, all of them streaming live. They poured onto the pier, their voices rising in a single angry shout. "We see you," one of the women yelled, her phone's light shining right on Aurelia. "We're recording. This is the real Harbor Watch. We see you. Agent Lorne. We see you. Aurelia Fain." Aurelia froze. For 1/2 second, she looked at the civilians, at their cameras, at Rumi, at the neutralized Lorne. She couldn't fight. She couldn't kill a pier full of mothers on a live stream. It was the hesitation I needed. I took the real SD card from my sleeve. I palmed it in my left hand, and with my right hand, I held up the yellow citrine lighter. "Here's your bonfire. Aurelia," I yelled. And I threw the lighter with the blank decoy card inside over the rail. It vanished into the black, churning water below. I kept the real one clenched in my fist. A deep, deafening foghorn blasted from the container ship, a monstrous, final sound. It was over. Aurelia's fake BMI force, the men who had been waiting in the shadows to burn the ferry, saw the civilian cameras. They saw their leaders fighting, or captured. They melted. They dropped their fake badges. They got in their cars, and they vanished into the night. The pier was a chaos of flashing blue lights, not from the fake BMI, but from the real Port Halcyon police, the ones who weren't on the ledger. They were confused, responding to the Harbor Watch's live stream, finding the city's most notorious criminal, Silas Armand, standing over a bound and whimpering Ezra Lorne, while the woman who ran the new federal task force was being held at knife point by one of Silas's own. And in the middle of it all, surrounded by 40 cell phones, was me. "She's lying," Aurelia shrieked as 2 of the Harbor Watch mothers clicked the heavy plasticuffs around her wrists. "It was him. It was Silas. He's the traitor." Rumi, her face pale and streaked with rain, just looked at the woman who had saved her and who she had just defeated. "You carried me in Riga," Rumi whispered, her voice breaking. Aurelia's face contorted with pure, cold venom. "That was business. This is business." That was the last word she spoke as a free woman. All eyes turned to me. Silas, dripping seawater and smelling of diesel, came to stand beside me. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, a silent, solid presence at my shoulder. "Marin," he said, his voice low. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't his victory. It had to be mine. I pulled out my phone. I took the small, sharp-cornered micro SD card, the real one, from the lining of my jacket sleeve. I slotted it into the small adapter Rumi had given me. I opened a new email. The recipient list was already populated. 2 independent journalists Rumi trusted, 3 community lawyers who had been fighting the Port Authority for years, and the personal email of the one state detective who wasn't on anyone's payroll. My thumb hovered over the send button. I looked at Silas. His face was unreadable in the flashing lights. "It's your city, Marin D," he said, his voice quiet. "Your call." I pressed the button. In the chaos of the shouting, the sirens, and the wind, it was the quietest, most violent act of the night. A thin blue line tracked across my screen. Uploading, then sent. It was done. The data was out. The next morning, Port Halcyon exploded, not with gunfire, but with information. The Port Halcyon Tribune ran a headline 20 lines deep. The Bureau of Maritime Integrity was exposed as a fraudulent corporation, funded by black money. The police captains were suspended. The 2 judges resigned by noon. Skarnov's entire network, which had been held together by bribes and intimidation, dissolved like wet paper. With their legal cover gone and their names on a federal watch list, his crews turned on each other, fighting for scraps. The city was a mess, but it was a clean mess. The infection had been lanced. We found Theo in the container yard an hour after the pier was secured, huddled in the back of an empty shipping container. Shivering, he saw me and just broke. He ran to me, burying his face in my jacket, his shoulders shaking with deep, ragged sobs. "I'm sorry, Mari," he wept. "I'm so sorry, all those stupid debts. I just wanted to fix it for Mom. I'm sorry." I just held him, my own exhaustion so deep I could barely stand. "It's over, Theo. No more running, no more stupid debts. We're done." Over his shoulder, I saw Silas watching us. He was wrapped in a thermal blanket one of the Harbor Watch mothers had given him. He looked spent. He met my gaze and gave a single, slow nod. "I'll take care of the rest," he said. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. He would handle the legal fallout, bury Theo's initial theft so deep in the paperwork of Aurelia's conspiracy that no one would ever find it. He was cleaning up the loose ends, but this time, he was doing it for me. The weeks that followed were strange. The Orchid Syndicate didn't disappear. It changed. I'd had a fight with Silas, a real one, in the greenhouse. "You can't just take her place," I'd yelled. "You can't fix rot with more rot. You have the power. You have the infrastructure. Use it for something else." He had listened. Now, the financial pages were buzzing. The Orchid Group was restructuring. Its less reputable shipping interests were dissolved. In their place, 2 new entities appeared: the Port Halcyon Fishermen's Fund, a non-profit offering no-interest loans to families who'd lost boats, and the Seabright Cold Storage Insurance Initiative, a legitimate, bonded and insured company to protect cargo. It was still his empire. But I had given him a new way to rule it. He was laundering his power, cleaning it from the top down. I went back to the Blue Gull Diner. I needed one thing in my life that was normal. I needed to smell coffee and bleach. I put on a clean apron, grabbed a pot of decaf, and got to work. The diner was the same, but it wasn't. The sailors were quieter. The truckers made less noise. My landlord, Mr. Kowski, whose name had been on a very minor list, was in booth 4. He saw me, turned pale, paid for his coffee with exact change, and left a $50 tip. On the wall, where the broken clock had been, Sal had hung a new bulletin board. It read, "Community Fund for Seamen's Families." The first donation, listed in neat print, was for $10,000, anonymous. My shift ended at 2 in the morning. The rain, which had hammered the city for as long as I could remember, had finally stopped. The air was cool, clean, and smelled of salt, but without the diesel. I pushed the glass door open, and he was there. He was standing in the exact same spot he had stood on that first, terrifying night, leaning against his dark sedan. But this time, he wasn't a shadow in a storm. The streetlights were all working, casting a clear, steady glow. He was just a man. He was wearing a simple gray sweater, his sleeves pushed to his elbows. He looked tired. He saw me, and he didn't just watch me. He smiled, a small, exhausted, genuine smile. He was holding a black umbrella, closed at his side. "You're late," he said, his voice soft. "Last table was slow," I replied, pulling my thin jacket tight. "Big tippers." He chuckled. "Walk with me." We walked, not toward my apartment, but toward the water. The piers were quiet, the harbor calm for the first time in my memory. "I heard you went back to work," he said. "I'm a waitress. Silas, it's what I do." He stopped walking, turning to look at me. "You're not, though, not really. What am I then?" "You're the woman who saved an entire city with a karaoke song and a text message." I laughed, and it felt good. I was thinking about the karaoke. All those kids, the stevedores' kids, the fishermen's kids, they've got nothing, nowhere to go. I was thinking I want to open a class, a free singing class, just somewhere for them to be loud. "Where?" he asked. "I don't know. The old church basement, a rented room." He was quiet for a moment. "The Oriole greenhouse is empty," he said, his voice casual. "Aurelia's assets were liquidated. I own it now, free and clear. It's just sitting there. It has incredible acoustics. And I recall, it has a piano." I stopped, staring at him. "You just let me use it." "It's not a gift, Marin," he said, stepping closer. "It's an investment. In the port, no strings." He was close now, that same distance as the boathouse. The air between us was electric, but it wasn't the lightning of fear. It was the low, steady hum of home. He rested his forehead against mine. His skin was cool from the night air. "I don't want to own you, Marin," he whispered, his voice rough. I'm not that. I don't want to lock you away. I just want to stand next to you." I let out a long, slow breath, the one Rumi had taught me. I lifted my hand, not to his chest, not to hold him. I just met his hand. Our fingers laced together, a simple, solid connection. "Then stand here," I whispered back, my eyes closing, "and wait for me, every night after my shift." I smiled against his skin, "until the rain really stops." He kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, urgent, rain-soaked kiss from the boathouse. It was slow, it was steady, it was a promise, the only one he ever made, being kept. It was a kiss that had all the time in the world. A sudden flash, a click. We broke apart. Mrs. Petrov, one of the head harbor watch mothers, was standing 20 feet away, her cell phone held up, grinning from ear to ear. "Sorry, kids," she called out, not sounding sorry at all. "The port's going to want to see this." She snapped another picture, Silas and me, hand in hand under the misty lights of the clean pier, the image that would be the talk of Port Halcyon for months. She was right, the port did talk, and I did open the class. The Oriole greenhouse isn't Aurelia's cold, silent headquarters anymore. We renamed it the Oriole Commons. It's full of life. It's full of kids, banging on the piano, singing terribly off-key. Silas, he's around. He doesn't come in. He doesn't interfere. But sometimes, when I'm locking up late at night, I'll see that dark sedan, parked in the shadows at the end of the long drive, just watching, just making sure the wind stays calm. And I just know that if the storm ever does roll back in, he'll be waiting for me, right outside the door. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. Please consider subscribing to the channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. If you enjoyed it, please support us by hitting that hype button to help this story reach more listeners.